A good day. Welcome back to Hibernate Framework, my dear students. As you are aware, we have made certain things in Hibernate, right? We went for a new Hibernate project. We connected to MySQL with the specific username and password, and show SQL is yet to see. So I'll show you today what this show SQL does. And second thing that what we have done is there are many different chains. Let me tell you. Okay, and we have done certain things. So let us start the project without wasting much of your time. Right, and I've also shown you the correct way of starting a session. Right, so let me give you a recap if we have to do it without making any change, and also I'll tell you about I'll tell you certain things about annotations as well. Right, so first let me go to this. We know that we made a model, right? In order to make this as a table, for example, you may tell tomorrow that I don't want my table name to be users, right? So because the table name is automatically mapped with the table users, and string is varchar, integer is automatically int, and strategy is auto increment, right? Which is identity. In SQL Server, you want your ID to be automatically increased or incremented, right? So for example, if you don't want your table name to be user, so what I'll just pass an argument here. Entity name is equal to user underscore details. So now my table name will be different. It will not be users, but it is going to be user details. And now we can say the table user details will be mapped with users automatically, right? And for example, I don't want my ID column to be this, so I can add another annotation right here, right? So I can say at the rate of column, right? So I'll add this at the rate of column annotation, and I'll change the column name, and I'll say that it is now going to be user underscore ID instead of user ID, and I will change the column name right here. So I'll use at the rate of column, and I'll say name is equal to FIRST first name. So it is automatically going to be merged with first name. So I'll do the same with last name. I will say last name, and I'll do the same with the username. I'll say user underscore name, and I'll keep the password as it is. And I have changed the table name now. Now I want my user details table of database to be mapped with this users class, which is my model, or you can say it is my DAO, which is data access object, right? And I want ID to be auto incremented, but the column name to be different, and first name, last name, and username instead of F name, L name, and username. Right, and transient, I know that this is just to show message, and this is just to confirm that the password and retype password match. It's just for validation, it's just for giving user defined message. So I don't want them to be mapped with the database, so I mark them as transient. I will immediately save this, and I'll go to my Hibernate. I'll say instead of update, I'll use create, because now I'll have to create a new table right here. So I'll go ahead and I will say test. So this is the URL that we're making test, or maybe register.jsp. Test is not working, so I'll say reg register.jsp. Here we're getting data inserted successfully, and now I'll go and say Fahim Khan, and password is pass, and password is pass. So I'll click Fahim was registered. Now if I go and take a look at my database Hibernate test, you will see that it has actually, I'll drop this, it has actually created a new table now, which is user underscore details. Means user table is now mapped with user underscore details. Instead of ID, we're getting column name, user ID. Instead of F name, we're getting first name, last name, password, and instead of username, we're getting user underscore name. So this is how it actually goes. This is how you plan your model, right? Because we're creating the database with an approach known as model first approach, wherein we create the model first, right? And once we create the model first, the database is automatically created, right? Isn't it fun? It's going to be a great fun, okay, working with this. So now, if for example, if we have a data time, for example, I will go to my register.jsp and I will say, hey, I need another value, right? And I need after before the username, I need another value which is date of birth. And date of birth. Or you can say DOB. So I'll say input type is date this time, and we will say txt DOB is my value for this. Now, if I go to users and I say I will make another string, not string. So this time I am going to make this as type date, which is java.sql.date, and I will say DOB, and I'll immediately go and create getters and setters for my DOB. Right? Can we add annotations to the getters and setters? Yes. Right, you can add, but it's most recommended to add it on the member variable. These are known as member variables, and these are known as getters and setters, or mutators and accessors. So you can tell mutators and accessors. Mutators means setters, accessors means getters. So now what I do right here, I will use this column name. So I'll use @of colum and column. I will say name is equal to, I'll change the column name, I'll say date underscore birth, birth. Now, because you want to create this table, right? What is the data type of the table, right? Because if I don't mention it right here, so let us see what is going to be there. So let's say what will happen in case I do not mention this, right? So I'll say cancel. I don't want to refresh. Let it reload first because it's still getting compiled. Yeah, we reload it. Yeah, now we have date of birth here. So I'll again enter because my database mode is still create. So I'm creating a new table still, and I'll choose my date of birth, and I will choose my username and password. I'll say register. Fahim was registered. So let's see what the data type is actually. What data type has been created, user underscore details. And now you can clearly see the data type for this. If I go to the structure, is date, right? So it's automatically mapped with date, but the data has not been inserted. Why? Because we have not mapped it. So we will go here and we'll immediately say user.set DOB, which is request.get parameter, and it is txt DOB. So I'm getting from details from txt DOB, which is right here. And now let's see whether the mapping takes place or not. I'll just refresh it so that the whole data is submitted. Okay, we have an exception right here. We'll have to see what that exception actually is. Okay, we'll read the exception from here as well. We can read it. Okay, let me clear and reload and read what the exception says from here. Okay. Not able to get it actually. Filter chain is creating an exception right here. Okay. Converted to java.sql date, that means incompatible time. Java.lang.string cannot be converted to java.sql.date. So that is where we are having a problem right here. So what is the type of date? It's java.sql.date. So we will say java date is going to be, what are the types of dates? So we will use AWT. We'll use java.util.date, right? Instead of java.sql.date, we'll use java.util.date, and we will try to recompiles. It's still loading, still an exception, so we'll have to see. Right, so we'll have to create a temporal, to convert the data type, we'll have to use the temporal annotation right here. So I'll use temporal, right? So we will say the temporal type is going to be not the time, but it is going to be date, right? So we've done this as well. Now I'm mentioning that the type is going to be only date right here. And let's see whether the exception is still, the exception is there. All right, so if I use java.sql.date again, so let's see. Okay, we're getting problems in adding the date here. Let me try and do this. Okay, txt request.get incompatible type string cannot be converted to date is the error that we are getting. So let me just go ahead with this new date. So let's see whether the new date is passed. All right, so I'll go with the new date right here. Let me save. We have imported java.sql.date. I will again import java.util.date. So now we have this. Okay, and I will go here as well. I will say java.util.date, and now let me go to register, and no error is there since we don't have any error here. So let me reload the application now. It should work fine. Yeah, it's working fine. So let's choose and Fahim Khan. So no need to choose DOB this time. Password. I'll hit enter. Fahim was a register. So now let me see what is in the database. Yeah, we're getting new date. That is today's date, right? So that is 24/10/2020. So now if I take this date and I say request request dot get parameter, right? And I will say txt dob. Right, so now we have an error right here. So we will say dot to. Okay, we have to parse it, right? So we will say new. I'll say new date, and this may work. Right, so we're trying to convert it to new date, and let's see whether this works or not, or maybe creates an exception. So let's go ahead. Fahim Khan, and I will choose my date of birth. So let me go back and choose some other date. So that is here PASS password. So we still have an exception right here in converting the date. So refresh and read the exception now. At java.util.date is actually creating problem once again. So which date have we imported here? Java.util.date. If I say java.sql.date, and if I go here as well and I say java.sql.date, and let's see what it does. A string cannot be converted to long. So I will say date dot we will take a value of this string and try and convert it. Now let's see what happens. Conversions are very important. It should work. Fahim and Khan. So let me choose the date of birth. I will choose, so let me choose some date of birth. So I'll say Fahim Khan. Password is pass and password is pass. So we still have an exception. That is where maybe java.util.date is now going to solve this. I just forgot which one works. There is something that works, maybe java.util.date or maybe java.sql.date. I don't know. So I'll say date dot. We have parse here. Can we use date dot parse? Can we pass this here? Okay. Long cannot be converted to date, so we will say date dot int year, int month. So we still have this problem. So if I get java.sql.date, so I'll say date dot, we have this. So we have a problem here. Which date and time would you choose to convert, right? So that is where the problem lies, right? We have to convert, we can say string to date in Java. So that is the main thing that we have to understand. Because input, what is coming from here is actually a string that is coming from the register. Right, and that's what we'll have to understand this, how to convert it, right? So conversion remains a big topic here. Okay, let me try something else right here. Let me try java.util.date. Okay, so now I'll do one thing right here. So I will say date, let's say about d is equivalent to new. So let's create a simple format. So I'll say is equivalent to new simple formatter. I will use the simple formatter right here, simple date formatter, rather simple formatter. So I'll use simple date format, and the date format is going to be date, month, and it is going to be year. So this is the format we will use, and we'll say dot parse, and we will use request dot get parameter, which is txtdob. So let's use this logic right here. Date d. Okay, I'll just terminate it here. So come back. Okay, I'll just terminate this and come back. Yeah, now it's fine. I think it should work. Okay. So we are creating an instance of date d. We'll say is equal to new simple date format, and we are creating a date format, and we are passing the request.get parameter txtdob here, and we can say user.set dob as d with that same thing that we have passed right now. And it's again java.util.date here, and it's again java.util.date here. So now we are creating a format. The date has to be first, month, and then year. Alright, so let's try this now, refreshing. Okay, it should work now. Yeah, let's try Fahim, and so I'll choose some date of birth. So let's say PSS. So I'll say register. Unparsable date is Java unparsable 2010. Okay, we have to first take year. So parsing it wrong. So we'll parse it according to the format, which is year, www. Right, and then we have right, and then we have the month, we have the date. Okay, what is trend is the month, and then we have the date, right? So this is the correct way to parse, first year and then this and then this. Okay, let's see this. Okay, Fahim was registered at the end. All is well that end is well, but we don't need to give up. So now date of birth has been inserted right here, right? Okay, let me try once again. with this. Alright, so let's try once again with this. I'll write down Fahim Khan and I'll choose some other date here. So let's say I will choose 2009 January, whatever it is. So I'll just write my name and my password. Register. Fahim was registered immediately, so quick. Right, so now date of birth is being inserted. Right. So now temporal data can have date and type or time step. It depends on the procedures. Right. What is temporal annotation that we have just used with Hibernate right here? Right. So what is this temporal annotation doing with this date here? We are mentioning using temporal, right? So it is basically precise date and time. It's actually temporal means precise date and time with precision. Right? If there is something which is not mentioned in the APIs of Java, it is automatically going to convert it, right? So it is basically that sort of an annotation. Means it's basically an enforcement, right, to convert the data type of the database. Not here. Here we have java.util.date, and in the database it's been converted to java.sql.date. That's why we're using this here to, set the specific data type of the data type, right? And what else? So for example, if we have an image, if we are taking an image, how do you mention it? Right? So we will use, for example, we have private string, or we can say private, string image. So how do you want this to be treated by your database? So I will say at the rate of lob. What is lob? It is large object, right? Or we have also seen blob or blob, right? So we have also seen blob here, right, in database. That is binary large object, and you have lob here, right? And this lob will convert your data to, let me create getters and setters here. The data type of the attribute is going to be now binary large object or lob or blob, whatever you may call it. So let me refresh and see what do we have. Okay, so we're getting Fahim was registered. So I'll go to user details table, and I will see, you can clearly see an image has been created with a data object. Right, it's long text, right? So lob means long text and blob means binary large object. Okay. All right. Alright, we've seen getters and setters here of blob. And we have seen, okay, what are the annotations we have learned so far? We learned the annotation entity, right? It is going to map and tell Hibernate framework, and this is something that you're going to map with the database, right? In order to create a new table, we will HBM2 DLL auto will be create, and then we can change the database name. If you want your table name to be anything different but not users, like user details we have set, right? And if you want column names to be changed as well, from ID to user ID, from F name to first name, you can use column. And transient is something that you want to skip and not add to the database, right? And lob is binary large object. It's going to get converted to text in MySQL, and it can get converted to something else in SQL Server or maybe in Oracle, okay, depending on the nature of the database that you are using, right? And now we have another thing right here. Now if we use the same session factory object, I told you, if we are using the same session factory object again and again and again, it is going to take a lot of resources, right? And what we have done for that, we have made a separate DB context file wherein whenever we call connect, it's going to give us the session, live session, and then we can close down that session. Now what we are doing here in the accounts controller, as you can see, the register function checks, starts the transaction, saves the user, and commits the transaction. In case if there is an exception, I roll back the transaction. That is the fun here, right? And it doesn't matter whether there is an exception or not an exception, we finally close the open connection, right? And it's been so simple, right? So there's nothing more complicated here. Let's go ahead and see a few more things, right? We have generation type auto, we have generation type sequence, and now what if I want to save arrays? For example, if I give you the problem statement, okay, and let's say the problem statement is we have a user class. Let's say this is the class user, right? I call this user class. Okay, wait a second. All right, so we have, for example, a user table. But what are we going to do? What is the question here? What is the problem that we are going to solve? The problem that we are going to solve here is how do you save an array, right? That is what the question is. How do you save an array? For example, we have the table user class. For example, we have a user class. It has an ID attribute. It has a name attribute. For example, it now has an address attribute as well, but now address has specific things. So let me just put it here. And it has a phone attribute, it has DOB attribute, right? Okay, DOB attribute. And now if I say address is basically itself having few more attributes as well. Now what are those attributes of an address that it has? The attributes of address that it has is street, state, pin code. Alright, so now it will be like this array. Now how do you save this to the database? This is the problem that you have to solve, right? Isn't it? Right? It's a big problem because how do you save address here? Now it's okay. It's absolutely all right that we have ID. ID is going to be saved here. Name, it is going to be saved here. Let's say about this, the name column. And how are you going to save the address? So that's what my question mark is, right? And maybe phone and DOB is going to be saved like this. But how is the address attribute going to be saved? So this is the question, because we're working with arrays right here, right? And now we need to understand the nature of this as well, right? How much time do we have? We have good time, so let's do this, right? And we can say that we have to apply collection, right? We can say that we have to apply collection persistence right here. Now what the question remains the same. How do you supply the collection persistence right here? All right, so let's do this. For example, let us go and add the following things first to the project, maybe. Yeah, let's go and add. After you have chosen the password, or maybe after date of birth, we have a new table row, and we close down a new table row, and we have a table column which actually has let's say about st, all right, and it has input. Okay, sorry, we'll have to make another TD right here. So it has input type text, name is equal to txt, street. So I'll close it down. So enter your ST name. So this is the column that we are adding. Enter your ST name, enter your street, something, something. Okay, after ST, we have enter your street name. So I will say, not here, street, sorry, I have a mistake, txt st. What is witty? Yeah, we are quite witty. So txt st, txt street, and what else we have? We have state. Right, and we say txt stat state. What else do we have? Maybe pin code. So I will use txt pin code, right? And how do you create it? I'll create a different class for this. Now see what I do right here. I'll go to models and I'll say wait a second, I want to create a different class because I want to work with an array. So I will make a class address address. So this is my class address. So I will not mark this as an entity because if I mark this as an entity, it will create a different table. So I don't want to mark this as an entity. I want to embed this, right? So what will I do right here is private string street. We have street and we have we have ting. Okay, we have street state and we have pin code. So let me immediately go and create getters and setters for this. It's done. Right, now what I do right here, I will not mark this as an entity. If I mark this as an entity, what is going to happen is a different table with address is going to be created. I don't want to create two tables. I want to use a single table. I'll choose EMB. I will embed this to the table that is actually there. So I will mark this as embeddable. So this can be embedded. Right, this is not a new persistence, right, that we have to create. This actually embeddable, right? And I will just go to now this is embeddable address and that's it. We are done. Now I'll go to users class, and the first thing that I will do is create another data type. Right here is going to be private, and the type is going to be address, the class that we have just made, and I call this as address. Now if that is embeddable, and this has to be embedded, right? So this is embedded, and the class address that we have just made is embeddable, means we are embedding or copying the contents of this class, including the attributes, into this users. Instead of creating a separate table, we are embedding the same different class or different data or different class. We're embedding a different model to our own model, which is this, right? And let's see what we do right now is that's it. So maybe it is going to solve the purpose, right? So let me just create insert code. I will say right click, insert code, getters and setters. Let me carry on, because we are still creating a new table, because we have to create now new. So now we have added few more things right here. Fahim Khan, so I'll choose my date of birth. Okay, we have added address, so I will say Fahim Khan and choose password as pass, and I'll say register. Fahim was register. And let's see what actually has happened to the backend. So I'll go to the database Hibernate test. you'll see the table user details has been created and it has inserted everything to a single table, which is not good actually. Right, and now why isn't the data inserted? The data is not inserted because we're not inserting it, right? Okay, so what I do to data right here, so I'll have to make another object right here. I will say ADDRESS. I'll say address. Okay, ADD equals new address. So it is going to be not the mail address, right? So we're not using GMS here. So we are using our own model address here. ADDRESS is actually in the model itself. So I'll say import model.users and I'll copy this, or I can choose it here. It's not there, so maybe some mistake. Or you can copy here, you can say import model.address, right? ADDERESS. So we have spelling mistake here. It's ADDERESS instead of ADDRESS. So I'll choose this. And now what I do right here, after giving the date of birth, I'll say ADD.setSt, right? So these are the things that we have to set. Set st, set street, set pin code. Alright, so I will choose request request dot get parameter, which is going to be txt citYst. Alright, so txt st, txt street, txt this, txt that. So I will say txt street, txt state, txt pin, CODE pin code, Pino code. Is the spelling right? Pin code, PINCOD pin code. Yeah, it's absolutely right. So instead of st, I will say set street and state, pin code, and we are done here. Okay, and now what I do here, before saving the object to the user.setDob is already done. So I'll just, before passing the same object to save, right, what will I do? I will say user.setAddress as a double D, because we already create getters and setters of address in the class users. Now you can clearly see here we already created the getters and setters here. Private address, right? That means it's a type of object. What is the type of address? Object. What are we passing from register.jsp? And object to the user address. And how many files are we mapping to the database? Only one file or only one model is being mapped with the database. So let me save and try again. Fahim was registered. So let me go ahead and see the details. Now you can see user ID, st, pin code, and if we have actually two tables that we want to work with. But that's not my question. That's not how it's going to solve the purpose.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. It's not going to solve the purpose like this. Wait a second. Alright, so let me change it to update now. Right, and go back and see if I try and register another user, what is going to happen if I try and register. For example, we have the student Naveed, right, Khan, and it has the same address, maybe the different date of birth. Okay, and Naveed, right, PASSWORD, PASSWORD. And now what we have done, we've chosen the username, password and everything. Naveed was registered. Now if I go and take a look at the database table, right, but this is not the correct way to handle things like this. So we have to use the most proper way of handling things, which includes many different things, right? And what are we going to use here is instead of using because address has to be in a separate table, so I don't want multiple entities to be mapped, but address has to be in a different table. So what I do, instead of using embedded here, let me get rid of this address getters and setters, and let me go and erase this embeddable. So I will use element collection here. Alright, so what are we going to use? I will use private, and I'll use the type here set, and the type of set is going to be AEE address, right? And we can say ADD, right? Or we can say list of, I'll use list of addresses is equal to new hash set, alright? And I'll again choose it and just close it down. So set has to be imported. It is java.util.set and java.util.hash set has to be imported. Now it's not going to be now embeddable. I will use another annotation. I will use another annotation known as element collection right here, right? And once I make this annotation, I regrow and make another getters and setters for this, right? And now I'll go to my register page, right? Instead of user.set address, now we know that we cannot do this. I'll say user.set set list of addresses as ADD, but ADD is again going to be now element type, right? So we know that it is going to be this ADD is, just a moment, address cannot be converted to set, right? What says that address cannot be converted to set, because we have to understand the logic here, right? After we make this as list of addresses, okay? So now we can do user.get list of addresses, right? And I will say user.get list of addresses dot add. And now because list, what is get list of addresses? It takes one argument, right? That is dot add. You know, if you have no information about hash sets and sets, so I will just tell you how to use hash sets and sets, right? Okay, let me just change it and refresh it. Naveed was registered. Now once I say Naveed was registered, now you can see that each and everything here is getting null, null, null. But if you go and test the Hibernate test, you can see now it has created two tables. One user details and another is list of addresses. Now if I do one thing here, if I just let me drop both the tables right here, which is the correct way of handling things, right? So I'll drop first table and then I'll drop the second table, because it will automatically create foreign key, right? And now if I go to here and instead of update, I will say create. Now it is going to create new tables now. All right, I'll just refresh. Wait for the message. Naveed was registered. The moment we get the message, yeah, Naveed was registered. If I go to the database Hibernate, now you can see two tables have been created. We have one table known as user underscore list of addresses. Another is user underscore details. And there is going to be a foreign key here. If I see, right, you can see the ID is automatically, everything is right formed like it had to be. If I go to user underscore details, it has every single thing. If I go to user underscore details underscore address, it has the address, but it has the user ID as well. Now what is this user ID? This user ID is, now you can clearly see, right, is being used as a foreign key and it's indexed right here. Okay, now how have we been able to achieve it? Right, we have been able to achieve it. This has to be embeddable, right, and nothing else. Yes, you can change the column name as well, right, and this has to be embedded, right? And what we can do right here, this users has to be embedded. Okay, and this user underscore details actually takes the argument element collection, right? You have to mention it as element collection and list of addresses. Okay. So, there has been lot of disturbances today, right? So practice this. I will put I'll put some more light on embeddable and other things tomorrow, inshallah. But till then, you got to practice very well, and you got to understand the basic crux and the basic logic of how everything else works here. Alright? So I'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah. And I'll re-explain in case if you're not understood well or you understood 20-30% less. I'll re-explain inshallah tomorrow. Right? And till then, you practice hard and see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye. Take care.